when you have them as well. So first thing I want to cover today is just the online sign-up process and how to access the GAM volunteer page. So we're still making a few modifications on the sign-up screen. So I know I heard from some of you this morning that weren't able to get into this link or see this one because it was on today. But we're working on a few things. But basically, to get to the volunteer page, you'll log into your account on the GAM website, gam.org, and then in the top right corner, you'll log in. And then once you get to this member homepage, you'll come down to the volunteer section and click the course rating volunteer part. And then you'll have some items that will come up. We'll have these items, help videos, resources updated as we move forward and get more information from the USGA. And also work to finalize the clothing for this year. Mark and I will talk about that and get that finalized ASAP, so you guys can get some things ordered if you'd like for the upcoming season. And then there's also some resources, and you can see that this upcoming events here has been added, and that I believe that will continue to be there as a point to easy register for upcoming events, but also to kind of view some of the other things that you're used to seeing. There's this drop-down menu up here, and this will include the ability to look at this event, your schedule for anything that you signed up for. So this golfer here, she hasn't signed up for anything, but if you have, you'll be able to see everything you're registered for. Or if you want to register for other events, course ratings, measurings, once they're up there, we're still scheduling that process. Obviously, there's snow on the ground, so we're not even we're not to a point where we can finalize that. But this is where you would view the upcoming events. Click on this magnifying glass here, and that will bring up the information for the event that's listed. Yeah.
The 3 seminars or 4 seminars that are coming.
Yep.
Are they all the same?
Yeah. So that was that, Nelson. That's a good question. We got that from. So they're all intended to be different, to go over the obstacles, because this is relatively new in terms of what we're doing in terms of covering these in this format. It might take 1 session. It might take 3 sessions. It might take 3 sessions and we get through half of it. Yeah, yep, exactly, yep. So if you want to sign up for all of them, and just like this one, we'll record it and have it available to view later. So if you can't make it or want to review it after the fact, you can definitely do that. The other thing here is also so this master schedule. This is still a work in progress, but this will basically list out all the events and anyone that is registered for those and has been assigned a role. That's kind of the stuff, the back end, but this is kind of the master schedule of everything if you'd like to see that. And then the apparel, which you don't need to view, is a built-in thing that we're going to get our programmer to remove. So don't look at that. That's not where you'll get your course rating volunteer apparel. All right. So that's, and then on this page too here, like I said, we're going to have some more updated resources once we get those from the USGA, specifically that manual that I referenced in the email. That's going to be a digital guide as a kind of an assistant to this course rating system guide that you have. Once we get that from the USGA, which they said they'd give it to us in December. It's now almost March. So we're hoping that it will come soon, and we've been pressuring them to get it out because we want to get all you trained, and there's plenty of references in that book to the manual, and not to be able to view it is kind of a little ridiculous, but we're working on getting that out to everyone as soon as possible. All right. Any questions on the volunteer page, sign up process? Okay. All right. So I guess before we get started into all the changes, we really need to take a step back and understand why the USGA made these changes, and some of them are, you know, more substantial than others. But really, the main reason that they rewrote the guide, for those of you that have been doing this in the past, is because of the World Handicap System and how that is now in place. And so basically, the way that we are rating courses in the United States is now going to be used across the world. So what was previously on your guide, if you have your old guide, if you have it in front of you, you have this USGA logo. It was the USGA course rating system. And now with the new one, we're getting rid of the USGA logo on its own. And now it's just the course rating guide. So it's not technically called the USGA course rating now. It's just the course rating. And that's what, right. And so as Betty was pointing out, you got the World Handicap System logo, which is overseen by the USGA and RNA in the bottom left. But there is a subtle change in naming, and that was really the main reason why they printed out these books, because these books are going to be used now across the world. In terms of this 2020 guide, the last time it was done, 2016 was the last time that they were printed. So the USGA has stuck to a typical 4-year cycle, and that's their continued plan to do that going forward. But you can see here at the bottom, it does say that they haven't determined the exact frequency, but they anticipate a 3 to 4 year cycle. And for those of you that were with us last year, you knew that we put some sheets on some of the pages as well. So that's another way that they've done some changes as well, is just by giving us a sticker to print or to put on the pages if they do make some substantial changes. But really at the end of the day, the reason for this new book is the World Handicap System. And now that what we've been using here since I believe 1983, we're now be using across the world. All right. One of the best changes, in my opinion, especially for my bad eyes, are that the tables are much bigger. So if you have a book, you can see that they're definitely a lot bigger, which is nice. Some of us will probably still need glasses to read them, but they definitely are a lot bigger, which is nice. The other thing is, and you'll see this, not a ton, but this again gets back to emphasizing that we are now a world handicap system that is used across the world. And so yardage, typically only applies in certain areas where we have a lot of golf courses off of the metric system. So now we have the term length as opposed to yardage to account for that. Not really important for us, but still to note is that we've got rid of the desert rating. So if we don't have to worry about that here, but in Arizona and other parts of the world, they have to rate that desert. That's now just been moved and incorporated into the crossing and lateral obstacles. Speaking of the crossing and lateral obstacles, so those penalty area pages or those stickers that we gave last year, those are now permanently cooked into the book. So now when you look at your book, you'll see there's tabs for the crossing and lateral now. And the other thing that we, and I think we'll probably talk about this a little bit later as well, but a lot of the when the USGA made this change last year, they insisted on leaving the term penalty area under penalty area crossing, penalty area lateral. We actually just ripped the Band-Aid off and got rid of the penalty area to avoid the confusion. But so now it's just crossing and lateral, which is what we're used to here. And those are now in the book. There also are some new guidance on adjustments with +1 and +2 options. So we'll go through some of these. The other thing that you can see if you just use this example on the screen, compared to your last one, these notes down here, there are added notes, some more information in regards to the specific tables, which is nice. But the relative look in terms of the tables is staying the same. And that concept that we have where we get our value out in the course, go to our table to get our number to put on the sheet, that still is there. Some definitions. So we already talked about the crossing and lateral, but these are now in the book, not on a sticker. And then they also include the desert as well, but we don't have to worry about that for us here in Michigan. And then they've also modified the extreme rough definition as well to include desert and also into that crossing and lateral obstacle. Penalty area is now in there, so that's a big one, and we already kind of got a head start in this last year with realizing those penalty areas and if they are indeed part of a lateral or part of a crossing, and how they can now be both and not one or the other. And then the other term that is new is this definition of a waste area. So I think most of us know what a waste area is, or probably hit in a waste area in some part or some time in our life, but now they have an actual definition. And this is just a shorthand definition, but if you look in the definition in the actual guide, you'll see that a waste area can be actually, depending on the situation, either an R&R, bunkers, or extreme rough. So it's nice that they put a definition in, but there's 3 different scenarios where it could come up. So that's not necessarily nice, but it is realistic depending on where you encounter them on the golf course. So extreme rough is now just part of the lateral and crossing. Yep. So so that's just gotten worked into the crossing and lateral sections. Yep. So and that really is kind of what we already had last year with the penalty areas, but now that tab is now officially called crossing and lateral. All right, transition zone. So we won't, we're not going to spend a ton of time going through all the details of the change today, because we're going to spend some time in a different session going through that in more detail. But with the transition zone, I'd be willing to bet, and I'll throw myself in there as well, is that if we were to look at what it was before, I bet you 95% of us weren't doing it that way. And now the way that it's being done is probably closer to the way that most of us were applying it anyways. So if we go through this and say, hey, that's what I've been doing all along, well, you definitely won't be the only one saying that. So So now we're going to use when the player is expected to reach the green at least 50% of the time. We're going to only use the long shot for the evaluation of the obstacles near the green, and then we'll use the transition value for the green target, R&R, and bunkers. And so we no longer need to find a landing zone just short of the green to further evaluate obstacles. So in the past, and someone needs to correct me if I'm incorrect on this one, but in the past you would basically take that full shot and then one shot short and then average the difference on those. Whereas now, if we're going to reach it more than 50% of the time, or at least 50% of the time, I shouldn't say more, at least, then we're just going to not worry about the averaging. We're going to find the lateral value or the crossing value, or I guess the lateral would be more applicable. The lateral value based on that approach shot in. So let's say it's 180 yards or whatever. And then when we actually get our green target value, we're going to go to that bottom row in that green target chart and use that and then use that to determine the R&R and the bunker numbers as well. And so that's if we're going to get there at least 50% of the time. So, you know, some of the things are reasons that you might get there more often than not. You know, things to look at would be, is the shot, you know, downhill? Is there going to be an area where the ball lands that would propel it to get to the green more often? Those are things that we want to look at to help determine if it's going to be 50% of the time. But if we're not going to get there, if the player is expected to reach the green less than 50% of the time, a landing zone just short of the green, 10 yards would be used to evaluate any additional landing zone for obstacles to be used in the transition process. Okay, and then we would not average these numbers into any previous landing zones, but treat it as independent landing zone. And this is to simplify the procedure and add more consistency.
But you would still use the transition zone target and just up at one?
Sorry, so say that again. What was the question was, you would still use
the transition zone target and up at one?
The transition zone
because if
target.
Most of the time you're not going to get there.
Right.
Then you would use the higher target by adding one. Or you're not using the transition zone target at all.
I don't know. Mark, do you know? So on this shot here, if someone gets their less than, or anyone out there, they're less than 50% of the time, you're still using the transition zone rating value in the target table? Is that correct?
That would be my summation. Mike Brady has done a little bit of research on that as well, so he might want to chime in. But I understand that you measure the obstacles at that 10 yards short of the green application, the green target value, because you're getting there some of the time, will still be used, and a reduction of one value point will take effect there. Mike, what do you think about that?
I would agree with your answer, Mark.
Okay. All right, perfect. Thank you, guys. So if you look at the chart there, it says that 50-50 transition rating value may be adjusted, may plus or minus 1 point when the center of the green is close to the front or back of the transition zone. That would be an optional adjustment at that point. And when you're reading that too, if you have the book in front of you, we probably should make a comment about that too. But you also see when you read that center is spelled wrong, or I would say center is spelled wrong, but it's the international spelling of center, or centre, or century, or however you want to spell it. But anyways, that's another example of this World Handicap book and how it's meant for the world. So speaking of the guides, if I think most of you saw the email that was sent out about the guides. So they are available now. We have them. They're $15, and we're going to do our best to get out to as many places in the state to get them to you. If you're here in the area, we can get you one now. But I'll be in Grand Rapids in about a week and a half, so I'm planning on bringing out some and letting everyone in that area know that I'll be somewhere that we can meet and distribute some as well. But those are available, and then we've had some requests for people that are that I'm not jealous of at all, that are in places like Florida and South Carolina and Arizona. And if you want us to send you a guide, we can definitely do that. We'll just have to get the shipping covered, but we'd be happy to do that for you. So if you would want to do that, shoot me an email or give me a call after, and we'd be happy to get the guide out to you so you can have it when you're out there roughing the Michigan winter in your different places of the world. So. All right, and here's just a pictorial example of a transition zone. So we have here, and this, it's not a great example, but the one that the USGA provided, but we have the bogey golfer here, that B1 in the middle is where his or her landing zone is. And then this is where, that their second landing zone to be. And in this case here, this is kind of their, what they are calling their 10-yard short, where they would evaluate that. And it looks like in this case here, we can't really tell by looking at this picture, obviously, what the contours of the hole is, whether they're going to get there or not. But in this case, we would apply that less than 50% of the time method here, where we're looking at 10-yard short, evaluating that, and then also using that green target value in the transition zone column. So
you get a narrower fairway, and if you didn't have fairway bunkers out there first landing, you use the fairway.
yeah, so the question was, in this case, like if you didn't have, if those fairway bunkers weren't there by B1, but you have those fairway bunkers, or those bunkers that are near B2, that would, if they're within the distance 25 yards, then yeah, that would still count as fairway bunkers. Yep, for that B2. Yep.
And it's also interesting when you're applying that 10 yards short of the green. This is a perfect example that there could be a bunker squeeze there as well, with a new definition of bunker squeeze. So always take that into consideration.
Right. All right. And I think Mark will actually cover that bunker squeeze. So that comment will, we can refer back to that picture as an example. So appreciate that. Roll has changed a little bit. So we've expanded the table for roll now to plus and minus 4. The other thing with this is that we're no longer going to evaluate roll when the player is not hitting a full shot. So if it's a forced layup, a layup by choice, or a dog leg, as this is already factored into the dog leg or layup value. Yeah, John. Okay. And I think, when I read this the first time, I thought to myself, well, I already kind of factored that in anyways when I was doing it. I mean, when you lay someone up or get someone to a layup point, you're kind of reverse engineering how to get to that point. And so I think that this is probably no net impact on how we're doing it. It's just that now we're not gonna, there's not gonna be the option to quote unquote double count by having a layup and a roll adjustment to technically shorten the golf course, or I guess lengthen the golf course more than would be actually, allowed by the actual playing yardage. Because if we're, I guess to use an example, if we're laying up to, we're laying up 200 yards instead of hitting out our 250 for the male scratch golfer, we're already putting 50 in there, and whether they get a -1 to get to that 200-yard spot, whether we put it in the roll and then put 45 for the dog leg, it all gets out to the same yardage. So we're just simplifying it and saying that roll is not going to be looked at for shots that aren't full length shots.
The golfer who can't reach the fairway on their drive.
Well, that adjustment was in, but just in a different location. It was in our, yeah, John.
Yeah, I sent Mark. I don't know if you can hear me. This is John Hollow, but I sent you and Kyle basically as to the objectivity or subjectivity as to what roll would be on slope, uphill, downhill. Is there any counsel on that?
I plan on covering that when I do the regional seminars around the country. We'll be able to view that in terms of exact angles and things like that. So that would be a great time for another day. I do want to say, however, that remember that this roll chart is not a roll chart. It's specifically a tee shot roll chart. So you want to evaluate roll as a tee shot roll, and then subsequently there is a 2 adjustment of 1 value point plus or minus for a subsequent full shot. So remember that this is a tee shot roll application.
Right. Yeah, that's an important point. And that really this 2 adjustment that Mark just referenced it's now a shot specific. And as Mark indicated, that this is just the tee. So before we could do multiple shots on a hole and apply that chart, but now we're just applying the chart to the tee shot. But then if we do have other shots that are gonna include roll, then we're going to be allowed to make that 2 adjustment for those subsequent shots. All right. So I basically, you're gonna, in a lot of cases, you're gonna be capped to a modified number here, and not as wide of a range as it was before. Because if you look at I don't have the table here on the presentation, but if you go to the 2 adjustment, it's just a plus or minus 1. So it's on page 13 for anyone that has a book.
Right.
But it is just plus or minus 1. So you're really on a 2-shot hole. The max that you could really get is a 5 now. Whereas before it could be up to 6 or more, depending on any adjustments that you made, because you applied that roll to multiple shots. But now it's just a tee shot, and then a possible 2 adjustment on subsequent shots.
So Kyle, if I can just pump in here again.
Yeah.
The +1 -1 is a minor slope, +2 -2 is a moderate slope. A significant slope at -3 +3 means that the typical roll of 15 to 25 yards, if you're using a +3 -3, especially the +3 when the course gets longer, you've just used up all of your 15 yards of roll. So if you're using a significant slope, you're saying you will get 0 roll. To get to the extreme slope, that means you're hitting into a bank, for instance, and the ball is considered then to be going backwards about 5 yards. So it's going to be an extremely rare opportunity for us to use extreme slope.
Mm. All right, so I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. So
Yeah, we get 15 to 25 yards of roll. 15 to 25, and a -3 would equal that 15 yard, or a +3 would equal that 15 yard application.
right, okay, so for every point or one, every one is 5 yards. Is
That has not changed from a couple
Right,
of years ago,
correct.
right?
Okay. All right. All right. Dog leg and forced layup. So this has been separated out. So they'll be, and thanks to Steve Stellini and his work, he's been able to get these now on 2 separate lines on the Form 1. So that we'll evaluate them separately, but now they're different. but the maximum of 50 yards is still in place between the two. And then we also now have a new minimum of at least 10 yards for a dogleg correction. There's no minimum for forced layup. And then they've added guidance about reducing dogleg corrections when a shot can be played past the pivot point but still make progress towards the hole. So I think and this is just from my personal experience, but I think the dogleg concept is one of the hardest to understand. And I think it's a higher level concept for sure. But I think that by separating this out, we definitely, it will create less errors on the Form 1. Because before, if you remember, it was on the same row and you just put a number in there, and a lot of times maybe it was notified, but that number was very important to the rating, because that either, if it was done properly, it either reduced or added yardage to the course, and more often than not reduced yardage, or sorry, added yardage, but with a forced layup. But if it wasn't applied properly, or the plus or minus wasn't in the right spot, that had a significant impact on the yardage. And so now I think it'll be clearer. It will result in a better rating, and I think easier for us to understand. I don't know if Mark, if you have any comments about dogleg or.
Well, the picture you've got there is very interesting. Yes, it does move from left to right. However, there wouldn't be any dogleg application here, because this is one of those areas where the ball can continue toward the hole without any impediments. If
Right.
where that bunker was happened to be a stand of trees, and you really couldn't get any further penetration toward the green on the tee shot, that would be an application then to apply a dogleg concept.
Right. Yeah, a full disclosure, I didn't pick the pictures, the USGA did. But yeah, no, you're right. That's I guess just looking at it from my perspective too. I mean, this course rating is a constant learning process, and I think it's something that you're with a very few exceptions of a few people, you really never become a master of this, and you're constantly learning and constantly. It seems like every time I went out last year or my first year doing this, I learned something new, and you just get better and better as you keep doing more. But Rick, do you have
As a sidebar, however, the measure will still be constant for what we've been doing, mainly a full line of play as designed by the architect.
Yeah, correct. So the measuring will still be done, to pivot points and things of that nature. Yes. Yep. All right. Topography. So topography, they've added a new column, and the main reason for this is that they've added this minor to moderate, which we often call the tweener. And the reason they added this was because it was used very frequently. If I believe correctly, it was the most frequent used number. And so they finally just realized that they needed to just make a column for it instead of, making the rater do an adjustment. Yeah, John.
You can say the same thing to Mark again. What is role of this as to what these meaning what is minor? What's minor?
Right. Yeah. And yeah.
Moderately awkward to somebody else.
Sure. Yeah. It is. And I think that, they're we can say, so for those of you who may not have heard John, he was just again asking, like, is there a way that we can distinguish between minor to moderate, throughout the chart? And there are certain things within the book that are definitely not cut and dry, and this is one of them. But it's our job to try to make it consistent as possible across the state, so that all of our courses are treated equally. And yeah, we'll definitely talk about this in our training sessions that we'll have coming up. we'll definitely talk about topography and what it means and how it differs. I mean, because obviously you have to also consider the player that's hitting the shot too, right? Scratch versus bogey is a lot different when it comes to your stance. So I think that will be something that we talk about, but there, unfortunately, at least in my opinion, there's no way that we can make this completely, cut and dry. Yeah, there's always going to be some subjectivity into it. All right, and then the other thing that you'll see in here as well is it now, and I believe in the old book it didn't have the breakdown of the elevations. It just had the 10. So now it has these, and this is something that when we measure the golf course, we get all of our elevations, so everyone knows, from Google Earth. It's a great tool, and has definitely provided some better accuracy once we started using that the last few years. But that's where we get our elevations from. So even though sometimes they may not seem accurate, we're literally just going to Google Earth. If anyone's ever used Google Earth or Google Maps, or you can get on the spot and it will tell you exactly where you are. But so now there is going to be a little bit more requirement for us to be a tad bit more precise on this. I think on our sheet we'll still list out the 10 to 20, so to make it simple for you all, instead of having to look through each one. But this will be a slight change for us, or the people that do the measuring, or the captains that get that elevation number, to be a little bit more precise in the number this time. All right, Fairway. So
Kyle?
Yes.
Kyle, it's Al. On the previous subject, why does it only apply to the approach shot? On a par 5, why wouldn't the second shot going to an elevated area, why wouldn't that same concept apply?
Can I answer that, Kyle?
Yes, please.
Sure. So on a 3-stroke hole or a par 5, there's a tee shot, there's a subsequent shot, and then an approach shot. Both of the shots that are not tee shots are in fact evaluated for topography. So for instance, if the second shot, which goes from a landing zone to another landing zone, and the area is moderately awkward, the guide indicates that you should go to the top row there and use the almost level with fairway, no matter how much elevation change there is, and use the moderately awkward stance and lie value there, which you see is going to be a 3. So then the approach shot, in fact, is that landing zone that's the approach shot to the green surface, and you evaluate the elevation change as well as your indication of what the stance and lie issue is. So let's say that in fact the let's say the elevation change is 10 feet from the landing zone going to the approach shot to the green, and you view that as a minor, it is absolutely flat, and you view it as a minor problem. You look at the 2 from the minor problem up or down 10, and the moderately awkward application that was your second shot, and you record the higher value. So in that case, you would in fact use the second shot application with the 3 to be recorded on your Form 1.
So that'd be
Yeah, I understand that. My question was why the adjustment on the approach shot only? If you've got more than 10 feet of elevation change on your second shot on a par 5, why wouldn't that also count as the second line here instead of the almost level with fairway?
Gotcha. Well, I can only tell you that the folks at the USGA began with that in the 80s, and they have not changed that throughout that entire time, that when you're using the second shot application, you measure only your stance and lie issue, and you must use the almost level with fairway line. That hasn't changed in the 40 years that they've been doing this.
Yeah, and I think too, Al, the other thing that Patty said here as well is that, you know, for that second shot or subsequent shot, you know, you can also impact that with roll as well, and you know, have a modest adjustment there for that. And you know, I guess the other thing to think about too is that, you know, when you're hitting in, your approach to hitting into a green is much different than hitting to a layup area. Your target for a layup area is typically much wider, much more generous. And I think that, I don't know exactly if that's one of the reasons why, but, you know, for me, I would use that as a possible explanation to explain why they're not looking at it to a layup shot or to a second landing zone.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
All right. Fairway here. So the fairway table is now just one combined table, which is nice, especially if you've bounced back and forth between men's and women's tees. Sometimes you just get in the habit of looking at the wrong color table. So now it's just one combined table, and we've seen this combined concept in other tables, but now they'll be at the fairway. So we still have the separate yardage listings that are on the left, the men's and the right for the ladies, but it is a combined table. It should be cause less confusion. We've also made a couple adjustments to the adjustments, a couple adjustments to the adjustments, I guess. But we've modified the +1 option for tilt under the W or width adjustment to say that contour or tilt in the landing zone, so that shots must be played to one side of the fairway, and a +2 option to use when the majority of the fairway is tilted and balls are likely to end up in the rough. So we've made that a little bit more you know, specific in terms of what to apply a +1 to and what to apply a +2 to with those examples. They've also modified the W- adjustment, 1 or 2, for narrow fairways to differentiate using a -1 from using a -2 by referencing a -1 for one side of the fairway and a -2 for both sides of the fairway if it can be easily played from the rough, as it can be from the fairway. So an example of this last part would be if you have a course that has a 27-yard wide fairway, but on the side of the fairway it's rough for 40 yards until there's anything else, and that rough is, you know, not extreme, just normal rough. If you can easily just play from that area as you can the fairway, and maybe the rough at that course is really short, that would be where you would potentially apply a W- in that case. And I think for those of you in this area, in this neck of the woods, I think we had that application at Fernhill, where the rough was so wispy, or not wispy, it was non-existent pretty much, where we had some W- adjustments or adjusted, because that you could easily play from that as you know, as the fairway. But obviously, if we have thick rough, if we're going to rate a U.S. Open course, you know, we're not going to have any W- on those courses, because the rough is very, very gnarly and thick there. So it depends on a lot of things. But now, instead of trying to make that subjective, you know, Kyle thinks it's a -1, or Kyle thinks, so probably more realistically, Kyle thinks it's a -2 and Rick thinks it's a -1. But now we're just going to say, okay, it's the left side of the fairway is open, so it's -1, and if both sides, then it's -2. And then we've also removed the O obstruct adjustment. And then it's been added under the W adjustment. So if you have the table in front of you, you can see now that under under Fairway, under W is now also a list of things that could reduce or effectively reduce. So a plus for W, and one of those is a overhanging tree branch in the landing zone. Fern Hill was right, Rick. Yeah, there's another one. Yeah, that one hole had 2 trees in the middle of the hole, as one of the dumbest holes I've ever seen in my life. So yeah.
Where is this place now?
It's in Clinton Township. Yeah. I mean, it's actually not a bad course. It was not. Hey, this is being recorded. No, it's actually not. It's just I don't know. And I think that the second tree only came into play from the back tee. I think if you played the forward tees, the second tree wasn't in the way. So it just had that one big one. But that's just a lot. And I'm sure that the other, not to get on this on tangent, but I'm sure, I mean, just as we've all seen from rating, I mean, a tree that we plant now in 30 years, a tree might be a 1 now, and in 30 years it might be a 4. So I'm sure that's what happened with that course as well, that some of those trees just grew and they maybe need to trim on them. So
This isn't a major foot, so it gets wet very
yeah.
I mean, really wet. Like all you can see is the trees and the trees.
The day after a race, you couldn't get on the course.
Sometimes you can only see about this much.
There's a course down by me. I live south of the city. It's the same way. I don't even think the course is rated.
Yeah.
If anybody's ever, it's called Westburn. Yeah. And it's like the bottom, like the back 9 is in a floodplain where there's times where it's just a bowl.
Yeah.
You can't see anything but green.
Right. Yep. Yeah, we actually, speaking of floods, and this does relate to course rating. So one of our courses, they actually have a flood 9. And so that's too, like when you're talking with courses, I guess more for the captains, but I mean, there's a lot of flexibility that we can do with ratings. So like Burning Tree has, it floods there. And so they have a legit rating for 9 holes that they use when it floods. And we can put that together. So and I think we'll see more and more of that kind of unique combining of holes and routing as we move forward, and as people my age stop wanting to play 18 holes and want to do 12 holes or less or whatever. So anyways, getting back to this green target. So we've modified the columns here. So and this is something that we will work into our Form 1. And basically what happened was we went from 7 columns to 6. And the reason for that is that the 7th column was the the lowest number, but in a lot of cases when you had greens that were larger, that made for more difficult putts, more difficult chip shots, and wasn't necessarily indicative of the low number it was getting. So now we got rid of that, and then now it's bumped up to that 6-1, so that it should result in a little bit more accurate numbers for some of these courses. The other thing too, that while I'm thinking about it, a lot of these changes, what does that mean for the courses that are already been rated? So we won't go and re-rate any golf courses because of these changes. But when we obviously do re-rate the course every 10 years, which is our mandate from the USGA, we will apply these things for this year, but we're not going to go back and retroactively look at the 600 plus courses that are rated and make these adjustments. And to be honest with you, I mean, I don't know, there are very few times where we even got into column 7 anyways. But just like thinking of all the adjustments as a whole, none of these are a reason for us to have to go back and re-rate golf courses because of these changes.
I see there's an F rating or F adjustment.
The F adjustment for,
Or green target. If the green is unusually firm, a well struck shot by scratch players.
yeah, for, yeah, definitely. So, and that's, I'm just looking here at my old book too. I was going to throw this old book away, but I figured it might be good to keep it just in case. So,
It is.
was it? Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
It's too small to see.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and that F adjustment, Patty, that you were talking about, I mean that's you know, it definitely could come into play on certain courses, and you really would see that, especially on you know, when you play it, and you also, you know, typically you'll see that on new courses as well. We don't deal with a ton of new courses in Michigan, but typically it takes them a while to get you know, a little all the grass grown in and everything not be as firm as it typically is.
Thunder Bay, also crown green, said nothing but
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
An example of that is the loop year open. Those greens you couldn't hold the ball
On the loop, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
on. The way they were built, crowned with how firm they were with the no thatch layer that first year, the ball was just hitting and flying
Right.
off the back of those.
Right. Yeah. Yep. No, and then that one's on our list. So I guess for everyone's information too. So when we do have a new course, we do re-rate it after 3 years to see if anything has changed. And so that would be one of those things that we would look at to see if, hey, did the greens, you know, get more realistic, or what the architect was designed it to be like. So that would be something that we would look at on that 3-year recycle for those brand new courses.
To add a little comment there, I think the F adjustment under green target ought to be used sparingly, and the captain ought to be kind of in charge of coaching his group about when and where to use them. Even on the loop, when firmness was under green surface, I think we used 4, maybe 5 for the entire 18 holes, and of course they were the same going in the other direction. So we used them very sparingly. We didn't make every green firm, of course. It would add too much value artificially. So use that sparingly. It ought to be under the captain's influence, and it is a change from the green surface application now and is appropriate on green targets.
Right. Yeah, and you know, the other thing too that we always have to remember when we're out there is that, you know, we see the course one day or maybe 2 days, and there are a lot of factors that could you know, influence that. So as Mark was saying, you know, we want to be conservative in that application because, you know, that's probably not indicative of play over the course of the entire season. It might be on the day that we're there, but not necessarily the entire season. So it definitely good to be conservative on some of those adjustments like that. Yeah, check with the course and see if that's, yep. And that's it. Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
Just a footnote type question here for target adjustments. We have that same definition of what we mean by tiered. I don't know if Mark or maybe Mike Brady has looked at this new book and whether or not it's changed in its definition from the old book.
Yeah, it has, and we'll actually get to that. We won't talk about it in depth, but we'll talk about that it has modified slightly. Yep. All right, R&R. So R&R, or recoverability and rough, is one of the adjustments. We've actually moved one part of the U, or unpleasant adjustment, into the I, inconsistent, when areas around the green are cut to fairway height to make shots more difficult, as these are similar in nature. However, the U, unpleasant adjustment, as a separate adjustment, will remain for areas of hard pan. So it basically these U and I, it's just if you look at the adjustments, they're really applying in these 2 cases here. What we're talking about, the changes are around the green, and how we're going to not you know, double count as it was before. There was kind of these two same things were able to be counted twice, but now we're just going to group them into one. We've also combined mounds and rise and drop. So now it would just be M. So I know at least almost every time I went on a rate, we would always have the discussion, well, it's not really quite an M and it's not quite an R. And as a group, we would just combine it and make it one adjustment. And so that's what the new, rule is telling us or whatever. It's telling us that now we're just going to evaluate it as one, and then we can combine it and get that 1+1 adjustment. Whereas technically before, by the book, we weren't able to do that. And then the other thing I want to point out here, and it's a little difficult to see, but on the screen you'll see on the M, where's my mouse? My mouse is not showing, but just to the right of the M, there's that star. Anytime you see that star in the book, that's saying that adjustment is a shot specific. So you could have, in this case, mounds come up on multiple shots throughout the hole. Whereas if we go to, let's see here, let's see if I get another one here. Well, if you look at your, there. So most of them are, but if we talked about like that green target where we had that F adjustment, we were talking about that's not shot specific. There's no asterisk next to that. So anytime you see that asterisk, that's just a key that is shot specific and could be applied multiple times. We want to be conservative about applying it multiple times, but that asterisk gives us the option to do that. All right, bunkers. So they've modified the squeeze adjustment to reference the total distance between the bunkers as opposed to the distance on either side. So the actual yardage has not changed, but as you can see in this example here, under the old system, it needed to be within 10 or 15 of both sides, and in this case, you wouldn't have a squeeze. But now, because it's just a total distance of 20 to 30 yards, this 29-yard difference is going to give us a squeeze adjustment now. And this makes sense because it seems kind of silly that you'd have to have it on both sides when in reality, the actual squeeze is the same yardage. Right.
Makes more sense this way.
Yeah, definitely. And it's easier to, understand as well and apply. And it requires less measuring and getting in the middle of the fairway and saying, okay, how far is it from this side to this side? It's a lot easier. So this will be good. And probably, we'll probably see a few more applications of this because of the change. The other change to bunkers is the carry adjustment. So this has been updated to reference a significant portion of the green instead of more than half. And the reason for that is to allow more flexibility. And really what we're looking at here is we're looking more at the playability of the hole as opposed to, the actual fixed distance. So in this case here, you might have, if you can see the picture, you got a little sliver of the green on the left that doesn't have a bunker, and you got a little part on the right that doesn't. But if you were to track the hole locations on that green, the majority of those would be in the middle of the green. And so if your play is saying that more than 50% of your play is to a certain part, then we're going to allow for that adjustment and not base it on the actual diameter of the green, but on play, which I mean to me makes sense. The one downside of that is that then that becomes a subjective thing that the crew has to agree on and say, well, are these? But there's some tricks around that, like we do for looking at greens, is that we'll go and look at the old hole cups to see if how many are here. If we have area in the top left corner on a little tier, if there are no hole locations up there, then it's just basically something that very rarely ever gets used. So that'll be, I think, more indicative of normal play, but maybe a little bit harder. It may take a little bit more effort to get the proper reading on this now. All right, we've also updated the extreme adjustment and to add guidance on using the +1 versus +2. So when we talk about this in some of the obstacle overviews that we do, I've got a great picture of our executive director when he was over in I think England at one of our trips, and he's in this bunker, and it's like 10 times the size of him. And so that is an example of an extreme bunker. Here's one where you can see that it's pretty deep, and really what they're saying is that now the +2 is going to require that shots be played out sideways or backwards, and that would cause a substantial loss of difference. So I think that guidance definitely helps and makes it more objective and less subjective. But we'll show some examples of some bunkers and what are extreme and when to apply +1 versus +2. We've also changed the procedure for measuring the greenside bunker depth to reference the frequent hole location, so that playability, not just any part of the green. And I think we've already kind of been doing this a little bit on the measuring teams, but now this will again go back to that whole idea of where is play generally on this green, and that we're not going to necessarily always look at the right. So and we're not going to look at necessarily the highest portion, or I guess I don't know if the highest or lowest, whatever. The correct turn, right? Exactly. Yep. So and I think in this case, like I said, I think we've been doing this for most part on the measuring already, maybe not entirely, but it'll probably actually reduce the depth adjustments that we do have in certain cases, because we won't be looking at necessarily the highest, I guess the way I understand it to be, the highest spot that I have to get to the green.
Well,
As
the high spot is where most of
right, exactly, yeah. So it'll just depend more on where most of the play is at. All right, crossing obstacles. So this one has again now completely in the book. No more stickers, but we've added a new carry adjustment when crossing obstacle closely borders the front of the green, as the player is landing the ball close to the front of the green on purpose, right? And they're not trying to maximize their distance or carry it. So when I carry a thing that's 200 yards with my driver, I don't even think about it. But when I'm carrying something that's a greenside carry, that comes into play much more often. And the fact that I get the same, by the chart, the same value for a 200 one as opposed to a 150-yard shot over water didn't really make sense. And so they made this adjustment here now that if you are carrying it and it's closely bordering, then you're going to add that C adjustment. So I think this is good. Makes a lot of sense. We've
still at 10 feet for closely bordered definition.
Still, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, yes, still 10 for closely bordering, Rick, yes. And then they've also modified the percentage adjustment. So now, and this change here is really just, semantics. It's not, it doesn't really have a huge impact, but the way the book read before, it said that it can be played from most of the time. It was changed to part of the time to allow for using less than 50% of the table value, because technically if it's most of the time, it needs to be more than 50%, but now part allows some more flexibility. And when we do that now, and I think we've all been doing this before with key adjustment, is when we do adjust it, now we have these set guidelines as 25%, 50%, 75%, or 100% reduction. And I think that will simplify it for many people. Personally, I kind of use a combo of this and just a point value. But I think as long as we use some type of procedure to apply this P adjustment, and we're consistent about it, then we won't have any issue. All right, lateral obstacles. We've just like we did with the bunker squeeze, we've modified the squeeze for differences, or the squeeze between lateral. So now it's just that total distance instead of on both sides. We've also, again, same change that we did with the crossing, was that now we're doing part of the time instead of most of the time. And then they've also added text to the bounce -1 adjustment to use when the obstacle is located behind the green. And the P adjustment can be used if it's needed. I think and this is just talking about, like, let's say, for example, we have something that's lateral behind the green and there's a downslope, and we have it would be a B minus would be like an upslope. So where the likelihood of getting to that lateral area is less because it's hitting into an upslope or the second or third roll. And I think most of us already accounted for this in the P adjustment, but now we just have the ability to also to do that with a B adjustment for behind the green. This J was removed. This was actually taken out in 2019 with those stickers, but now it's officially out now. And that was just, I believe, if the value was over 5, if you could go to one side or the other, you could apply a J adjustment down, because you're technically not aiming at the middle, you're aiming at the left side. If there was water on the right side and nothing on the left, you would aim farther left than in the middle. But that's now out of it because it really wasn't used that much. And then this one here, they've clarified not to use the K +1 adjustment when the table value is 1. And that includes a minus bounce adjustment. So if you see when you see in the new book here, you'll see that if you look at the chart, there's really not too many instances where we have a 1 as a table value for lateral. But when that does come up, we will not use the K adjustment to take that from a 1 to a 2. And I guess the example that I would think about is that you just look at the first one here. You have a scratch golfer that has a 100-yard shot, and there's an out of bounds 50 yards or 45 yards left of the green. I mean, you can't really justify that is a 2. And I think the way that we've done it, at least the way I did it before, was that, well, yeah, we'd have that K plus adjustment, then we just put a P minus next to it. But now we're just saying that we're not going to allow that K adjustment for any value that is a 1. All right. Keep moving. If anyone has any questions, feel free to speak up, but we're going to keep on moving here. Trees. So we changed the squeeze adjustment here to a Q to an H. And so now the H will, and then the chart for the chute is a little different as well. So before it started at 2 yards away from the chute, and now we're going to go to 8, which makes a lot of sense because 2 yards away from the chute, I mean, that's pretty close. I mean, it's not like you're really worrying about it at that point. But yeah, so that changed, or that table has changed slightly. And then we've also eliminated the O obstruct +2 adjustment, but made the O obstruct +1 shot specific, so it can be applied more than once on the hole. Okay, so again, I think that's just taking some of the more subjectivity out of it, in that now it's just, if it obstructs, it's a +1, but if it does obstruct on multiple shots throughout the hole, we can hit it multiple times. All right, Rick, here's the tiered definition. So the tiered definition is now using the term significant and reference to multiple hole locations instead of at least 50% of either the width or the depth of the green, as it was before. And it was a bit confusing and can include greens not meant to be tiered, such as the picture below. So you have like this scenario here where you probably have that chunk of the green that fit, all the definitions before, but maybe they have the hole up there once every month or once every, couple weeks. Right. Yeah, exactly. And
Conversely, the tier does not necessarily have to go completely across the green either.
oh, let me look at the definition of that.
Once again, we should be looking at where the old holes are.
Yeah, John, yeah, and I think that's where, that's another thing where we look at those old hole plugs to see where they are to determine how much play is on a certain part of the
Significant portion of the game.
okay, so it doesn't say, it just says, yeah, as Patty said, a significant portion of the green, the elevation change area, and two plateaus with one ramp. Sorry, it has to be two distinct plateaus. And for those of you that are thinking or asking the question, well, we never even talked about this tiering or whatever when we're out there rating, and that's because typically this is done as part of the measuring process, and you already have that information on your sheet when you go out to rate the golf course. All right, the last obstacle here, and this one is not really anything that we technically worry about because it's done by the computer, but just because it's in the presentation that the USGA sent us, we'll go over it. But before, on the first and the 18th hole, there were automatically 2 points of psychological factor on these holes. And we're taking that away, and the reason for that is because there's more and more courses that are using holes over and over again. So for example, last fall we rated a course in Lansing called Woodside, and it's a 12-hole course, and the way that we had to set it up was that the extra 3 holes that are out there, they have to be added in as a 9 in the system. So we had to use 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 to get our 9. When I put it in the system, I kept getting why are these numbers different on each of the holes? Because I look at the first 3, the second 3, and the last 3, and they were different. And this whole psychological thing was why, is because it was kicking in on hole 1, but not on any of the other one, not on 4 and 7. So now this is out, even though we all know standing on that first tee, there definitely is a psychological factor on that first tee, no doubt, for sure, but it's taken out because of that reason. And then a few other ones that, again, these aren't important because we don't evaluate these are all computer done, but they have changed the X to the E, but the same criteria, and then modified the verbiage to include the crossing the lateral and take out the water hazard and extreme rough. So with that, we've kind of got through the changes. I don't, if there's any questions on the changes anyone has here or on the call. No? Okay. So I guess, going forward, we'll speak a little bit differently to the two groups of people that we have. So we're working on developing, for those of you that are new, we're working on developing a kind of a beginner's kind of training that we can go through so you can kind of understand in more detail what we're talking about here, kind of go over some of the basics, how far the scratch player hits it, how far the bogey player, women, men, all those differences. So we're working on that, and we'll have a presentation or something put together to go through, but also for the new people as well. And I think some of the people in here can attest is that we also will help you on the course as well and put an experienced person with you those first 3, 4, 5, 6, however many times it is to go out there to provide guidance and for them to be a sounding board and for you to be able to ask them any questions that you want. So we will definitely, you won't be thrown out there, to the wolves on your own for the first time for sure. And we're here to help you. And then for the people that are, coming back and that have been doing this for a while, we're going to spend those next 3 sessions that we're scheduled going through in more depth the obstacles in kind of a similar format, but we'll have a presentation here, and we'll basically put everything that's in the guide in the presentation and talk about what these adjustments mean and go more in depth and when we would apply certain adjustments and certain situations where we wouldn't. So that's kind of the plan for the next couple weeks here. And then once the weather starts getting better, we'll be putting together some additional training for on-course work that Mark will lead up and at different places across the state. And then once we'll be starting to work on the scheduling process here in the next couple weeks. And once we get those scheduled, we'll be putting those on the website for you to sign up. And the sign-up process will work similar like it was last year. And we'll send out more information once those start popping up. And also once we get those tweaks that our developer is working on for the system. But we're pretty excited for a good year. We've got, I think, 50 some courses that are on our list, and we'll be adding more as we always do throughout the year. And we're just looking forward to a great year. A lot of new changes, but not a lot of substantial changes, just a lot of minor changes. So I don't know, Mark, if you have anything else to add before we close today.
No, just to say it's great to have you all in the training process over today and over the next few weeks. We do plan on doing some regional on-course applications to visit the topics that John and Rick have brought up concerning topo and some of the subjective stuff and roll and hills and firmnesses, that kind of stuff. So we'll be getting more of a hands-on application. And then welcome the rookies. I understand from Kyle that we've had 30 plus, 33 in fact, folks sign up to begin the rating process. So welcome all of you guys, and we look forward to opportunities to meet and greet and begin your process of becoming golf course raters. So welcome all.
All right. Yep. Thanks, Mark, and everyone that joined us on the call today. We will be recording this. We'll also put the presentation from today up on the website for people to view as well. So appreciate everyone's time, and we'll see you next Tuesday, I believe. Thanks.